Welcome everybody to the 100th episode. Super stoked. Sorry for the delay and different setup, but we are all kind of making what we have at the moment, especially myself. I have so much clutter here, there, everywhere, but we made it work for the sake of the show. We're going to start it out like we did the first episode, but 99 plus later with David as well. So we're going to kind of try to morph together things that we've talked about in the various conversations we've had, from quantum mechanics to cosmology to the Kalam or philosophical arguments, or I think, David, we didn't get into fine tuning yet, did we? Maybe
not with me, but you guys did talk about it a number of times, I think.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. First off, I want to apologize for the delay. A lot of that falls on me for different scheduling conflicts. I think people know how life goes, work and school and all that, plus personal things. But we're still planning on doing this as much as we can, ramping it up as much as we can when we can, and maybe Cease can reify for everybody what to expect for at least this show. And then maybe later at the end we can discuss plans for future shows and what we're going to decide to do. But what do you want to get started with today?
Sure. I think we're planning on going over a number of theistic arguments and some of the misuses of science and misconceptions of science that we've run into when engaging with religious people. And yeah, just ask. I just want to ask David some questions and see what his perspective is on some of these arguments. I know you said that you have a clip ready as well about Dr. Craig that we'll play at some point. I guess since we haven't addressed the fine-tuning argument with David yet, why don't we start there, and then we can see where he goes from there.
Sure. Did you have any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, David.
No, sounds good to me.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had any particular, if you had wanted to go with a formal argument that you had, Cease, or if you just kind of wanted to informally talk about the general idea, present that to David, which I'm sure he's familiar with that, but just for the sake of the show.
Yeah, obviously.
If you wanted to kind of get into that, and then so I don't think we're going to attack a very a specific argument in the literature, since
I would just think about it generally.
Formulate one with the general idea. All right, so then in that case, let's start with maybe go over a general gist of it, and then I know I have some objections, or at least one that sticks out to me, but we can get to that later.
Sure.
Should we describe what fine-tuning is?
Yeah. So from my understanding, it's the idea that the fact that the universe seems so precisely tuned for life, and the observation that if the constants of the universe were changed seemingly even slightly, that life would not be possible, and that the universe as we know it would not be possible. And theists use this argument to try to conclude that the best explanation for this is that a tuner must have set this in place in this way, that it couldn't have come out of natural processes, that it has to be some consciousness setting it up this way on purpose. That's how I've heard it described. Have you heard different?
Yeah. Versions? So the idea that we don't know why the constants of nature are what they are. So maybe we should talk about the constants of nature. These are things that appear in the physical laws, right? And so if you can imagine asking, how would things change if we change these constants? And basically you're changing the forces of nature, right? start to change that, and certain things will look different. Some things will actually not be able to form, depending on the range of values that you postulate. So I think it's fair to say that yes, if you change these constants by a little bit, then the things that we understand lead to life, we would struggle to have them occur. So life would not exist if we change the values of these constants slightly. Now, what to make of that? So maybe we can think of the opposite situation. So let's imagine a universe where you start to change the constants of nature, and you find that life emerges. You still get life, right? So imagine a situation where it's just the opposite. You change the constants, right? You imagine a large range, and you get life. Maybe you get different kind of life, but you always get life, right? And imagine that universe. What would someone say in that context? Would that be a universe designed to have life? Isn't that a reasonable conclusion? It's a universe that's robust to the existence of life, right? So that suggests that we're just asking the wrong question. It's the opposite of fine tuning. That is a universe designed for life.
Right.
You can change certain things, but you still get life.
Well, so actually, that's one of the things that we had. It was Dr. David Johnson, right? Cease, I believe.
Mhm.
Dr. David Johnson, who came on, and he had given an objection, which is one that I've kind of rendered to Cease before, and we kind of had this moment on the show where it was like, oh, I already know what you're gonna say because I say the same thing. And I had found out where the source of that came from, but it's this idea when you talk about change is, and a lot of my ignorance might creep in here, obviously, but so like if we take the mass of a neutrino or something, like if I Google that, it has it like, I don't know, 10 to the something 37 like kilograms, right? And so the measurement's in kilograms. Would we be off base to say, like, say we take the mass of a neutrino or whatever, some constant, and if in fact we are measuring it with, I guess I'll just use the analogy. Let's say we measure like LeBron James in light years, right? And we say if 5% difference in his measurement in light years, he wouldn't be able to play in the NBA. And that would be true in the sense that, like, in one case, he'll be like 60 feet tall, and then the 5% different in light years will be like, say, 6 inches tall. But if we had a more precise measurement, like say inches, and he was like whatever 40 something or 50 something inches, and we made a 5% change to his height, it seems like we would be able to say not only would he still be able to play in the NBA, he'd probably still be one of the best basketball players, right? And so I'm wondering if we have the same type of issue where the constants dependent on the measurements creates this, if it was off by whatever type of error, when in reality we're just kind of measuring LeBron James in light years. If that makes sense.
What you're saying is that the range for change is actually far greater than what the theists want to pretend it is.
Yeah, because if you do it in the case of the height, right? If we do it in inches as opposed to light years or whatever, that 5% actually is a wide range, and in fact, like, it would, he still has success in the league and is still in the league. Analogy being, we still get life, and probably even more like competent forms of life, like primates like ourselves.
Okay, so the argument for fine tuning is one that's based on an analysis of the constants in a way that doesn't depend on the units that you choose to evaluate those constants. So it's not unit dependent. And so it's an argument that survives. So I would say that it's not.
So you say that objection would like kind of die in the water because it's not actually going to pertain to those types of units of measurement.
Yeah, you can choose whatever units you want. You can do the calculations. Your change is is not unit dependent, and you'll still get the same kinds of structures. So the calculations that you do don't depend on the units that you chose to do the calculation. They are independent of that.
I see.
And so, but my point is, what my idea, the thing that I expressed before, the idea that I expressed before, sort of speaks to what to make of fine tuning, because it seems to me that if the opposite of fine tuning, which was the scenario that I contemplated, if the opposite of fine tuning is something that you would use to say, the universe is designed to have life in it, it's robust to life, then what do you make of fine tuning? If fine tuning is also something that you would then use to say, the universe has been designed for life, then what is a universe that's not designed for life?
Right, exactly.
I see. So
yeah,
I agree. The one last thing I wanted to mention on that, and then I don't know, see if you have some things before we kind of go further into it. Mine might not, I don't know if David, if you're as interested in this, it's somewhat of a common objection, at least I've heard in like more philosophical circles, that if we suggest that there is such, so let's just bite the bullet that there is some type of fine tuning of constants or something, and then what explains that data is to prompt a designer, right? That has a specific desire, right? And that desire is to have a universe designed for life. Now, when we motivate that type of explanation, it seems that we kind of kick the can down the road, because if in fact this deity has desires finely tuned for life, then why couldn't we ask a similar question about its desires, right? Because its desires are finely tuned for these constants, right? To create these constants, as opposed to any other type of constants for any other type of outcome. So it just seems like we have to kind of arbitrarily motivate it. And per the reasoning of the theist, we should now posit a designer for that designer's desires. Because if in fact those desires are finely tuned, it would just follow by their own logic that we need to posit something that finally tune those desires, right?
Sure, but now you're speaking more generally to the notion of a good explanation. So it's no longer within the realm of science. So then we can talk about the fine tuner, right? But that science no longer can address that kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that's more of a philosophical.
What to make of
sure. So let's start at the base level with the science, and then so I don't know if you have anything you want to say, or David, if you want to continue, but that's a good flag to plant, at least. I agree.
Just real quick, I want to post this. Spartan Theology writes, I think the best objection to fine tuning is to say that if God designed everything, then there's nothing to point to that it's not designed. So you can't know what something undesigned looks like.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, because a naturalist could actually take something designed and undesigned and differentiate, whereas a theist is just going to have everything that's designed. So they have no.
I don't agree with that, actually. I don't agree with the comment there, because things that follow naturally from physical explanations are things that you would not say are designed or that require a designer. And that's true of biology, of course. That's one of the problems, people not understanding how evolution operates, right? How natural selection operates to create the structures, and how you get the appearance of design from things that are not designed. So if you see patterns, and those patterns, if things follow patterns, follow laws, they emerge from that directly. The issue here is that we don't have an explanation for why the constants are the values that they are.
But and I guess what I would say is that I can acknowledge, the constants being what they are, and the changing of those constants leading to a universe without life. What I don't understand the moves theists make is to then build this kind of metaphysics off of that observation. It doesn't follow. Like, all you're saying is, we would live in a different universe if it was a different universe. But it just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, what is an explanation? You have to provide something more concrete than an appearance of something.
Okay, a scientist would have to stop at the scientific argument, saying fine-tuning is interesting from this perspective. I interpret it in this way, that somehow the universe conspires to create life. But I'm suggesting is that's just one way of looking at something, when we could look at a completely different scenario and suggest the same thing, that the universe is really designed for life.
Which I think it makes more sense how you approach it. It's like basically there's nothing that could convince a religious person that it wasn't designed. It's,
right, but that's strictly in the scientific realm. Then, of course, what you do with the designer once you get to that point, that's completely outside of that.
Right.
But I also wanted to point out that there are other. So what I would say is the way to interpret fine tuning is that it's something that screams out for explanation. I think that's reasonable. But what to infer from that, I don't know. And there are other places where you see that the universe is in a state. The universe, as we observe it to be right now, is in a state that seems unlikely, and that seems to be something that we ought to explain. Right? Given the laws, we observe what the universe is like, and we see it in a state that is that tends to be difficult to get from those laws. That's something that we want to explain. What to make of that, I don't know. But the point is, there are other places in physics where there are surprising conditions that scream for explanation, but you would never say, "Oh, this is for the existence of human beings."
Right, because it has something to do with actual life. It's just tuning of other kinds.
Yeah, so it's a kind of, I wouldn't call it fine tuning, but it's a kind of strange combination of things that don't seem to make sense given what we've understood about the laws.
And why would God need to create a universe that was so counterintuitive and inexplicable in this way, like where this goes back to also, I guess we could talk about actual intelligent design in a second, where actually the best designs are ones that come from simplicity, not complexity. Because the more complex a system is, the more likely it is to fail. So why would this universe be this? If God can make any constants God wants, why would it?
Why is he limited to physical constants as opposed to like immaterial whatever?
Why would physical constants be a thing in the first place, and why would it be so counterintuitive that it would lead to the things that we're seeing? Like, it would make more sense, like David said, it would make more sense if this was finely tuned, that any universe that we could change into, any constants that we could change, will lead to life rather than what we actually see.
Right. If we think of the analogy that you just made with biological systems and evolution, you think of systems that can survive in multiple environments, and very different kind of environments. Right. Those are the kinds of things that you want to build so that you have the maximum chance of surviving and thriving. Right. And so it's the scenario where you want the laws of nature to be structured such that they are compatible with life for a wide range of possibilities. Right. The wider that range, the stronger the basis for life. Right. If you can get life and despite changing all those different things.
Yeah, I think
that
it's
seems
amusing.
to be the opposite of fine tuning. So
it's amusing that creationists use complexity as an argument in their favor when actually it's the opposite. The complexity is a point against the idea that anything is designed. So yeah, I find that.
Well, I'm not sure I'm following you. Complexity suggests complexity in certain spaces suggests design, right?
I think complexity suggests. No, I disagree. I think, well, maybe in some contexts, but I think overall it's the opposite. I think any good sign of good engineering is one that is actually based in simplicity. That the simpler, if you can get a certain task, but through a simple process or through a simple mechanism, that the simpler the mechanism is, the less likely it is to fail. The more complex it is, the more there are more points of potential failure in that system.
Okay, but telephones and computers, they're not simple systems. They're design and they're complex, right?
True, and there are.
Is that not just a mind-dependent notion, though? Like I've always kind of just taken complexity in these notions just to be mind-dependent, not really like there's this mind-independent notion of complexity in the world that doesn't seem to follow to me.
I mean, I think that what.
Like what in virtue of what is something complex over simple? Or what's the difference? Is it because
I'm
it's
not
seemingly
sure
to
how
me
people
it's how we model it, right? Something that's simple is going to be easier to model. Something that's complex is going to have more issues in terms of modeling the phenomena. So that just seems to me to be more of a mind-dependent notion.
Well, complexity is actually a technical term, and there is a sort of a definition of it. We can look it up, but I mean,
no, I mean, I get it. I just, no, I might be talking in a different space. I just, the way that I've always seen people characterize it in these type of contexts, they're just expressing like attitudes that they feel about phenomena and saying that it's complex. Like, I mean,
there's a colloquial way of using this term, but there are complex systems, computers, telephones, cars, airplanes, that are clearly the product of design, right? You wouldn't argue against that. That's what I'm pointing out.
No.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean,
but I guess what I'm saying is that if this God is all powerful, the preference would be like obviously these things
is this what you're trying to say, Cease? Or something
right. So we design complex things because these is a situation that we have to work with. But now we are referring to the designer of everything, the designer of the laws themselves. So why would it be that complexity would even be a thing if it could be just made to be simple? Because remember, he's supposed to be the creator of reality as we see it itself.
Yeah, I get the impression we're mixing concepts. So the laws you can consider simple laws that then lead to complex structures.
Right.
There's nothing incompatible there.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
But if you want an interesting world, you want some degree of complexity. If you want a universe with just empty space and no complexity, that's not very interesting, right?
Gotcha.
So I mean, you're not arguing that a God would make a universe that has no complexity, and that would be an uninteresting universe.
So you think? I'm trying to think of what you just said, because that's what we see now, right? But why couldn't why couldn't have God made a universe that was where the simplicity could still lead to something interesting and just change the dynamics of what the laws themselves?
That's what we have. That's what we see.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We seem to have boiled things down to a small set of laws, and so all of the interesting structure is governed by these laws. Of course, we can then argue whether these laws are simple and
Mike, did you
elegant and beautiful and so on? But
did you want to move on to the Kalam? I know you have a video clip ready.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things, I guess. So yeah, I mean, because David, on the more scientific perspective, so like you would just kind of grant fine tuning from your perspective, seemingly.
I don't think questioning fine tuning is a great thing. There are some people who say maybe it's not really true. We don't really have the complete answer there, but it's a reasonable thing to assume that the universe is fine tuned in this way. What I'm saying is, so what? What to make of that? Are you getting the wrong answer?
Yeah, I typically grant that. My issues on the philosophical, because I don't really see, like, I think I'm on your same page. I don't really see anything intuitively problematic on that view.
No, I don't see a problem. I think there's something that needs to be explained. There's something interesting there. We want to explain things that we see because there's some tension there between the state of the universe and the laws. So there's something that they want to explain, but that appears in many other places. So you can imagine changing these constants and you'll get universes that look very different. So you change the constants and you get a universe that only has space and nothing interesting in it. You change the constants a little bit, you get some interesting structure. You change the constants some more, you get more interesting structure. You get stars, and you get galaxies, and you get black holes, and then you get life, and so on. So you have a variety of things that you get and you don't get. So it seems to me that if you always have space, for example, then isn't that suggesting that the laws are compatible with the existence of space? And so space is the most important thing. Without space, you can't do anything. In fact, you can't even write the laws without thinking about space. So maybe space is the most important thing. Why? It seems to me that we're not thinking about this correctly. It's the things that survive
Sure.
that are, as you contemplate changing the constants, that may be the most important
kind of
thing.
the issue, at least. Well, the thing I harp on is, let's grant, at least in the conversations I have with theists, it's like I have no problem. Let's grant the fine tuning. We're trying to explain the data, and you're proposing that your data, or that your explanation does succeed at that, but it's always at this weird cost of like such obviously motivated reasoning from my perspective, where you just have somebody that posits an entity with certain desires, like very specific desires, and that sums up the explanation, right? So I know that's not kind of where you're at, but it's like that to me, it's like beyond the kind of accepting of it. If we're talking about explanations, nothing. I guess let me ask you this way: like, would you agree like we should prefer some type of novel predictions as opposed to just like giving a story that fits the data? Because that seems like we can just make up we can motivate any entity for any type of explanation, right?
Well, ultimately, what we want is an explanation to why the constants are what they are. That's not forthcoming. So until we get to there, we can only speculate. But we need an explanation. What I'm suggesting is that there's a way of thinking about this. We're thinking about this wrong. There's a way of thinking about this in which universes, because when you think of changing the constants, you're basically thinking of a group of universes, an ensemble of possible universes. So most universes, if we think of this experiment, changing the constant, most universes don't have life, and so life doesn't seem to be very important to universes. It's just the opposite. I don't think there's an inevitable way of thinking about this.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean we have to deny fine tuning.
Yeah,
no, I would. I mean, I'm interested on those views, at least from people in the like physics community and what they have to say. I'm fine with granting them. I don't have an issue with that. And my ignorance creeps in there, so I don't know how I could like be like, yeah, I lean this way or that way for sure. It just seems to be like I think that's a little too much hubris for my primate brain. But when I do tend to grant that, I just get, and maybe CC will understand kind of my frustration. It's like it's just always the explanations are they probably uninterest you because they're very unscientific. They're not like anything that's going to generate a prediction in the future. It's just like, let me motivate an entity that has these desires. And I feel like we could do that. Like if I have bad days on Mondays, right, I could like say, oh, what explains that is an entity that desires that I have, bad days on Mondays. Like I can do that, pretty easily. And that just seems like extremely uninteresting.
Right. No, that makes sense.
Anyway, so yeah, we can move on. I know that more.
There's one quick comment. What do you make of this? We cannot run the experiment in other universes. You cannot know if other universes don't support life.
Well, if we had the ability to do the calculations and we were certain of those calculations, we could do imaginary experiments. That's what I'm proposing.
Right. Okay, so what topic do you want to move on to next? I guess, did you want to go over the video? Right?
Yeah, we can just throw the video on. For anybody, like, sorry if you kind of have already been through our series, but our conversations with the Kalam, then we're probably going to touch on a lot of what's already been said. It's just been a while. Maybe David has some newer opinions. I know that given that you're involved with like this on a daily basis, maybe new information or things have changed your opinion. But we kind of wanted to just sum up where you are on it, Cease's kind of opinion. I'm like pretty much what's called a mereological nihilist. So I don't think things begin to exist or have causes really at all. I think that's kind of like a term that we well, we can get into that. I just deny the first premise for like completely different reasons.
Well, I should point out that a lot of the work we did, what is it now, a year and a half ago or
Yeah.
something, was specifically to distinguish between the two things that you just mentioned, which get conflated often, which is beginning to exist and cause and effect.
Yeah. So before the video, like, what do you have like kind of any take that you want to talk about with just that premise, because that might be able to get the ball rolling, and then
I could hear a weird humming from your end.
Is it coming from me? I
think
don't
it's
think so,
coming
because
from-
when I mute
it might be me. I can like
Oh, it's
hear.
your fan. I think it's probably your fan.
Can you hear my fan?
I think I can. I hear.
That's my
like,
laptop fan. Yeah, I got a replacement,
It's
and
not a
it's
big deal.
apparently wasn't a very good one. So, yeah, I'll try to mute up when I'm not talking then.
Sure.
Yeah, there it is. So yeah, comment on this. So what I would maybe point out is that these theist arguments take time as primary, as fundamental, as their anchor, right? You want to ground things at certain times, but time is fundamental. I've never heard a theist argument that doesn't take time as an important kind of thing, and that's strangely, well, how to say this, that seems to be somewhat in tension with ideas from science, particularly physics, which suggest to us that time, strangely, isn't that important. The more you study physics, the more you study the laws, you start to notice that time is some kind of, it starts to disappear. It's not important. That's a very strange thing, because you the first day of a physics class, of your introductory physics class, you start to construct things, and the things that you use are space and time. You talk about motion, you talk about how things move from one position in space to another position in space in time, and time is fundamental there. And so it's very strange that little by little time seems to kind of disappear from your laws. And in fact, we can then write laws where time doesn't appear at all. And that's a very strange thing, because you would think that theistic arguments, right, you would think that God knows something about the laws of the universe, and this is a feature that's there. And I've never seen this topic discussed in a theistic context. So
I don't understand this comment that was made. Time is the effect of the cause. I'm not sure what that means.
What? Yeah, I'm not really sure.
So you're mixing different things. So maybe the best that one can do is to say that time is kind of a label on different states of the universe. And if you want to say that one state is the cause of another state, then that's a different thing. But time is sort of in the middle there. It's involved. You can't have a cause and effect relationship without time. But time isn't cause or effect. Right? Cause and effect are contingent on time.
Well, and so if say we like kind of motivate, because Craig wants to call that the causal principle. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. If we're like really more like honest about that premise, our experience really just tells us everything that I mean, let's shelve kind of our issues with the beginning and the cause thing, right? Kind of play on their field. Wouldn't it just generate this idea that everything in our experience has a cause ex materia, right, from something, whereas this whole notion from theists like Craig, for example, who has written about this, he claims that the universe is created ex nihilo, right? God creates it from nothing, which doesn't even comport with that causal principle to me, because it's clearly our experience, the kind of inductive evidence, if we're going with that, is to say things like come from things. So if I take if I create a table, right? If a table begins to exist, I'm taking non-table material, right? Like nails and lacquer and wood, and forming those things into what we just call a table. But I didn't really like cause the table, right, to do anything at all, right? It seems like there's this kind of this notion that they want to ignore that it beginning to exist, if we give that, is going to come from something. So then when we get to the universe having a beginning, in the conclusion, it's just going to be that it's from a material cause, right? Or a material and an efficient cause, as like the kind of Aristotelian notion. So it just seems like, if you're going to be honest, it seems like you're not going to say that it came from nothing, right? Like as intended by Christian theology or something like that.
So you're suggesting that there's already some issue in our everyday experience with the idea of things coming, things beginning, and of course then that's going to carry over. So that's,
the conclusion would have to be, so the universe had a material cause.
Okay, so I think I agree that there are some issues with things beginning at some point, because there's an issue with the notion of the identity of things. This seems like a philosophical argument, but the reality is, when you talk about a chair, when did the chair begin to exist? You'll find yourself, a seemingly straightforward question.
Yep.
You never
be able to pinpoint that moment.
You'll never have a clear answer.
That's why this might be a radical. This is what Craig says is a radical view.
Right.
He never gives an argument. Is what's called a mereological nihilist, right? So I don't think there are composite objects. I think there are just subatomic particles, and things just are arranged, right? Given thermodynamics and things, nothing like begins. It's not coming from nothing. Yeah, it's forming.
Your notion, the notions that we have of certain things like chair and table and so on, these are things that are you're kind of extracting from a continuum of stuff that's out there. It seems like the kind of thing that a philosopher would say, but I think there are issues here where even on our everyday scales, normal everyday life, it's hard to really get a sense of how this will work. So the problem is already there. I agree with that.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it seems like these are more like emergent features.
Exactly. A chair is an emergent kind of object. It's an object that we identify because we are creatures that inhabit a certain scale. We view things on a certain scale. We don't see, quantum effects. We don't see the large scale structure of the universe. We see things on our scale, and so
that was exactly what I was going to say. Was, if you imagine like flying over, say you have a bird eye perspective, you fly over like a football stadium, and there's a trillion band members creating shapes, right? It's like, is it the trillionth member where the football shape gets its ontology? And if that sounds like kind of strange, then what's kind of different about other types of arrangement of subatomic particles? Like, when does the constitution happen?
Start pulling the atoms off of the chair. At what point does the chair lose its identity?
Exactly, because I can just take water and get a mold and freeze it, and then I have like a chair made of ice. So no one could say, well, chair's made of like, salt, like wood, or like, right? We can just always play around with this really easily and realize that it's seemingly just dependent on our minds, or better yet, utility, right? Which is going to just be based on how we view objects for our
these are all emergent kind of structures, and it's a language that applies to an emergent kind of world. But what's going on there is, matter and energy, obeying the laws of physics, morph into different kinds of structures, and it's sort of a continuum, and you really shouldn't have a conversation about things beginning or ceasing to exist if you want to have a deep conversation about the nature of the world. Apart from that, so yes, I agree that there are problems in everyday life. It's not radical, whatever it is that Craig criticized with Craig's criticism. When it goes to the beginning of the universe, now we're in a completely different realm, and who knows what applies there?
Yeah,
you
I
can't
try to ignore that premise because I'm like, look, I am not going to pretend like I am qualified in that domain to determine this whether or not that premise is true or false. Like I'll leave that to people who study that, for the
as I mentioned,
universe beginning to exist premise at least.
yeah, it's very strange to take this cosmological argument, which was an idea proposed by a philosopher over 1,000 years ago, and try to put it to give it oxygen in light of modern science.
Sure. All right, so I guess I'll pop up the video. We'll see. Well, it's 10 minutes, so it's not too long, but we can just, I'll mute my mic and tell me to pause, and then I'll pause it. Probably should have played the ads first. So, I guess skip ads. If you're just tuning in, we've gone over this with David a lot. We're just kind of reviewing, so keep that in mind.
The origin of the universe. Have you ever asked yourself where the universe came from? Was there a beginning to the universe? Or does it just go back and back forever? Typically, naturalists have said that the universe is just eternal and uncaused, and that's all. But there are good reasons, both philosophical and scientific, to doubt that this is the case. Philosophically, the idea of an infinite past is very problematic. Think about it. If the universe never had a beginning, that means that the number of past events in the history of the universe is infinite. But the existence of an actually infinite number of things leads to metaphysical absurdities. To give one example, what is infinity minus infinity? Well, mathematically, you get self-contradictory answers. For example, if you had an infinite number of...
David,
did you say pause it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because actually I forgot that there's this whole kind of thing before it. So, David, yeah, sorry.
David, do you want to say anything in regards to that? Because I saw you make a face.
Well, here he's diving into a space where common sense intuition really falls apart, and he's insisting on using that intuition. And we've talked about this. Infinity appears all over the place. Yes, I share his problems, his issues. I don't know what to, maybe I shouldn't say it like that. I don't know what to make of infinity. I'm not sure, what to say about the ultimate status of the notion of infinity. Is there an infinity out there that time goes on infinite into the past? He says, think about it, and you'll arrive at a contradiction. What's the contradiction? That there's an infinite number of events. So what?
He's actually in writing has stated that he's like backtracked and said, well, there's not a logical contradiction, and so he has not delivered a contradiction at all. And in fact, Alex Malpass and Wes Morstan wrote a paper to show that there really isn't a symmetry breaker between that and the infinite future, and so that's going to cause the same type of problems for eternal heaven and accepting Jesus.
Yeah, we talked about this, but the idea there is that one is actually there, whereas the other one isn't. But all of these are ignoring some of the things from in particular relativity, and I don't see contradictions there.
Yeah, I don't either. Anybody interested in so two things. One, Craig's intuition, it's like absolutely crucial for a lot of his views, I've noticed. So that we definitely have a similar eye. I think Cease, you probably agree that he heavily relies on his intuitions, which is not really a great thing to hinge on for the sake of your argument. And then secondly, if anybody cares, you can check out that paper by Wes Morstan and Alex Malpass. It's really really interesting. Let's continue.
Coins numbered 1, 2, 3, and so on to infinity, and I took away all the odd numbered coins, how many coins would you have left? Well, you'd still have all the even numbered coins, right? Or an infinity of coins. So infinity minus infinity is infinity. But now suppose instead that I took away all of the coins numbered greater than 3. Now how many coins would you have left? Well, just 3. So infinity minus infinity is 3.
Okay,
And yet in each case, I took away an identical number of...
But I don't understand the move, because I don't think anybody's saying that infinity is a measurement that one can do these operations with, are they?
Yeah, well, I'm not great at math, but I think there's different like size infinities. They're called alepphs, I believe. Is that correct, David? I don't know if you're...
There are all sorts of things, also sorts of precise calculations you can do with infinity. They're counterintuitive. So what?
Okay.
Yeah, and there's in the Malpass-Morriston paper, Craig's concerns about like the cardinality increasing. I can't remember. I don't want to butcher it, but it's in there. Malpass and Morrison give like a function. They label it like a function and b function in there, and they basically give Craig like what he wants in this type of notion. It's I'll butcher it, so I don't. I would. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but if you are interested in the infinity thing, that's also or at least that function and what they demonstrate, go check out the paper.
Of coins from an identical number of coins and came up with contradictory results. In fact, you can get any answer when you subtract infinity, from 0 to infinity. And for that reason, inverse operations like subtraction and division are simply prohibited in transfinite arithmetic. But that convention doesn't apply to the real world. You can give away whatever coins you want. This shows, I think, that infinity is just a concept or an idea in your mind, not something that exists in reality. David Hilbert, who was perhaps the greatest mathematician of the 20th century, states, and I quote, "The infinite is nowhere to be found in reality. It neither exists in nature nor provides a legitimate basis for rational thought."
One thing I don't really understand about this is like how these concerns don't just apply to the entity that he thinks is fundamental to reality. Right? Because like, why would that be finite? I've just never really grasped this type of concept of what he's railing against seemingly just applies to the entity he believes
Well, if infinity is prohibited in some way, why is it so powerful a concept? Why is it that so much of what we do in science can't be done without the concept of infinity? Why is that?
So are you saying that the problem is in the way that we, I mean, if it leads to some kind of contradiction, which I haven't heard yet, which, you know, like how would you respond to the coin example he just gave? Like, how do we navigate his issues?
Well, you want to we're creatures that evolve in a certain kind of environment. We have an intuition about that environment. The concept of infinity isn't one of those concepts that we've needed to develop an intuition about, right, in order to survive. So we're a kind of creature. We should expect to find, as we go deeper into the nature of reality, counterintuitive concepts that we have difficulty grasping. So it seems to me, you're dealing with the notion of a good idea. If infinity is so powerful and we need it, why do you want to dismiss it? How can you dismiss it so casually? Seems to me, just because it's counterintuitive. We should expect counterintuitive things. Quantum physics is counterintuitive. On the same basis, would we dismiss all of quantum physics based on the fact that it doesn't gel with our intuitions? That doesn't work, right? So again, with time is an extremely powerful kind of idea. We couldn't make sense of ourselves without the concept of time. Yet when we look at the physical laws, it starts to disappear. What do we make of that? Do we just use our intuition and say, no, 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 time is there. There's something wrong with all of these physical laws. They're ultimately nonsense because time is real and there's some kind of flow quality to it. We don't see it in the laws must be wrong. These are the conclusions that you get. It seems to me like bad ideas. This is what you get when you ignore the message of modern science, which is what you actually would predict from biological evolution, that we are a certain kind of creature, and the deeper we go, the more we see things that are just counterintuitive to us. We have to learn to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I've noticed about Craig in these domains is that he adopts these kind of strange views in effort to protect the Kalam, right? He wants the finitude of the past, right? And he wants like all these notions that he dies on a hill for. They don't. It doesn't seem like they're. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it without coming off rude. It seems very motivated, right? Like obviously motivated to me.
I think it still
like
fails.
Like his theory on time, right?
But
isn't this ultimately kind of inevitable? Because theism has roots going back hundreds of years, right? And therefore it has roots in a counterintuitive approach to the world. And so it's almost bound to come to come into conflict with ideas of modern science, right? Because they're not intuitive. And theism is, by and large, every version of theism is intuitive to the core. Is that not correct?
No, I mean, yeah. You play outside intuition, like causality or anything. You hear theists talk about David Hume's skepticism on causality or anything like that. It's like you're immediately met with this like, ugh, like it's so intuitive, and it's like, well, sure, like we can grant it, but it's not intuitive that it's like fundamental, right? That I don't see, but those are kind of arguments or intuitions that they want to hold to for some reason, as opposed to like, you bring up emergent type of causation, and it's like that for whatever reason, because it's absent their intuition, is just enough for them to dismiss it or something.
But I would also say that certain core aspects of theism are based on words that people throw around. They actually don't have a concrete concept of, like how they just sort of ignore the mind-body problem. Like, oh, God is this immaterial spirit thing that can somehow give rise to the material. That makes perfect sense. Like, it's just looking the other way at what's actually being said. Or, well, God exists outside of space and time. I don't think that these words have any linguistic meaning, ultimately. They're just things people say because they're not actually thinking about the words in any real depth. I don't know what existence means, or what saying outside of space and time means. And I mean, even if we were to grant, okay, let's throw infinity out of the conversation, it does not lead to the conclusion that he wants to be true. None of this ultimately makes the idea of God any more credible, even if we were to ignore some of this stuff, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. If you're talking, I don't remember specifically what I said, but I'm pretty sure I was just referring to counterintuitive by their lights, is what I believe I was saying. So, I don't expect someone's intuitions to be shared with other people. That's why I don't think intuitions are a good indicator.
Sorry, what was the comment on counterintuitive things?
Counterintuitive is subjective. Please don't include everyone in that presumption. I think in the case that what I was saying was just that it's going to be counterintuitive from their notion, and thus, right, just give it, or at least it's not going to. I think the way I said it was that it's not going to be intuitive, right, for them, and thus they'll just dismiss it. But that's like plenty of things aren't intuitive to us. That doesn't make it not true, or true given whichever position you take.
The role that remains for the infinite to play is solely that of an idea. But that entails that since past events are not just ideas in your mind, but are real, the number of past events must be finite. Therefore, the series of past events can't go back and back forever. Rather, the universe must have begun to exist. This purely philosophical conclusion has been confirmed by remarkable discoveries in astronomy and astrophysics. In one of the most startling developments of modern science, we now have pretty strong evidence that the universe is not eternal in the past, but had an absolute beginning a finite time ago. For all matter and energy, even physical space and time themselves, came into being at a point in the finite past. As the physicist P.C.W. Davies says, the coming into being of the universe is discussed in modern.
We should point out that this is completely wrong.
Yeah, I was curious on on his confidence there, what you thought of it.
There are model-dependent conclusions. One of them is that the universe. Well, I'm not sure that's even right to say. No, there's no consensus, and there's no evidence that points to the finitude of time. That's completely not correct.
I'm gonna have to clip you saying that because I had a conversation with somebody earlier on the phone about that, and I'll be like, "Hey, I'm gonna appeal to authority here." Anyway,
we should mention. We also talked about quantum physics, guys. We should mention something about that because the Nobel Prize was given, I think, yesterday or the day before, for an experiment that basically confirmed all the weirdness of quantum theory.
You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I would say if you could verify, that'd be great.
So a few times, Mike, you mentioned the spooky action at a distance in a context where we didn't quite fit, but this Nobel Prize was given specifically for an experiment that confirms spooky action at a distance.
But what specifically entail? Do you know like what were the exact conclusions of it?
So, maybe we can just go quickly describe what spooky action at a distance is. Mm-hmm. In quantum physics, things can be in superpositions, right? We mentioned this.
Yeah.
So maybe for simplicity, we can imagine that some kind of object has different colors, blue and red, and objects can be in a superposition of both blue and red. That doesn't mean that it's both blue and red at the same time.
Sure.
It's not a mixture. That would be green. It's just in some weird. We have no intuition about this. At the same time, it's two different states at the same time. I don't know what more to say about that. But so we can have these objects in these superpositions, and you can have multiple objects in superpositions. Imagine two objects in superpositions of blue and red color. Okay. Now you sort of rub them against each other. You make contact between them, and you can create a connection between them, and then send these two objects far apart from each other. That connection remains, and so. What Einstein and Bohr were discussing, what Einstein came up with this absurdity. He thought this was an absurdity, given the rules of quantum physics. That if you then measure the state, you measure the color of one of these two objects that's in New York, and you find that it's blue, you automatically know, right? So the color of the object isn't well defined; it's in a superposition. You measure it, you get blue. You automatically know that the other object is red. So there's an instantaneous communication between these two things. And Einstein said that's what follows from quantum physics. That's absurdity. There must be, the theory must not be describing everything completely. There must be really a matter of fact as to whether the objects are blue or red to begin with, and we just don't know. So we describe them as blue and red. And so that was a debate, and no one knew how to decide whether or not quantum mechanics is really incomplete, and whether the full story is that the state of these individual objects is a superposition, blue and red at the same time, or whether there really is a matter of fact as to whether it's blue or red. We just don't know. So if we just don't know, it's because the theory is incomplete, because it doesn't get us to the full state. And so 1964, Bell, this guy named Bell, figured out how to determine whether or not, how to do an experiment to see whether or not one is true versus the other. Are there hidden properties? Is the color really fixed and hidden? We just don't know about it or not. And they did the experiment in 1982, and they showed that the statistics of the experiment showed that there cannot be any hidden blue or red nature to these particles. It really must be a superposition. Otherwise, you can't get the numbers that you get. They did that experiment in 1982, and now they were given the Nobel Prize.
Oh, okay. So that's where I misheard you. So you said they're saying that they confirmed that. That's what you were saying.
Yes, they confirmed that weirdness.
Okay. That's why. Okay, that's why. Okay.
And that was a lot of that video that we discussed second time that I was on.
Yeah.
Well, they tried to make it look very technical and stuff. They were just confirming the weirdness in more and more detail.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That sounds a lot more familiar. Which, by the way, you all can go back and have a better recollection than my own bad brain with that. So, yeah, let's. We'll have to bring you on a not a redo, but to go over that a lot, because I think that's one of our higher viewed videos, if I'm not mistaken, the quantum physics stuff. So it'd be great to.
Sure.
Seems like if that's what people want to hear, we shall deliver it.
Science is not just a matter of imposing some sort of organization upon a previous incoherent state, but literally the coming into being of all physical things from nothing. Now, of course, alternative theories have been proposed over the years to try to avoid this absolute beginning. But none of these theories has commended itself to the majority of the scientific community. In fact, in the year 2003, three cosmologists, Arvin Bord, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, were able.
I just wanted to comment. It's not like people want to try to avoid something. It's not like they have an agenda. It's that positing a special moment in time seems to be in conflict with what we understand about the laws, right? This absence of a beginning seems to emerge sort of naturally. It's not like people are insisting because they don't like a special moment.
They're like, ew, that's icky. I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to explain this to a couple of people I know earlier that are very heavily science deniers, or not heavily science deniers, but they're very, well, there's a lot of bias, and they want these things to be true. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how science works.
I mean, why doesn't time emerge straightforwardly in science?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Why doesn't time emerge in a completely straightforward, intuitive way? It rules our lives. It's the most important thing from our perspectives. Yeah. Why doesn't it appear? Why doesn't it reflect that? Why isn't that reflected in the scientific laws? What is that telling us? What do people make of that?
Well, it's interesting given his views on, because he's an atheist on time, right? He has some like really strange views that I think are only motivated by him defending the premises that he offers in the argument. But
able to prove that any universe, which is on average in a state of cosmic expansion throughout its history, cannot be eternal in the past, but must have a past space-time boundary. This theorem applies not only to the standard model, but also to semi-classical quantum gravity models, inflationary models of the universe, and higher dimensional brane cosmologies. Vilenkin pulls no punches. He writes, "It is said that an argument is what convinces reasonable men, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place," he says, "cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to."
he mentioned brain cosmology. This is string theory stuff.
Yeah.
And he said that so the a time before the beginning is not possible in brain cosmology. Yet there's a model of the universe for the Big Bang, which is that it's just a collision between these things called brains. And so the Big Bang would not be the beginning. It would just be the moment when the brains collide. So it's very strange that he's using brain cosmology to deny a time before the Big Bang when there's a model that uses brains. It's a cosmological model that explains the Big Bang as some moment in time when two things come together.
I've been saying this for a very long time. Craig doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's driven by just his bias, and he just throws in concepts together, and it's not actually.
Well, he is mentioning the Guth-Vilenkin board theory, which is a model that's grounded in the Big Bang.
Well, sure, but if you
Sean Carroll though, in their debate was like, basically just like, Craig keeps pumping this as like, these conclusions, and then Craig's like, I have, what's his name? Alexander Guth? Sorry, I'm losing the names now.
I don't remember his name.
Anyway, he was like, well, I have one of them here, and he just like a picture being like, that's basically not what I'm saying.
Alan Guth.
Yeah, Alan Guth. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an embarrassment. That debate was such.
Because and there's videos like the skydive Phil goes skydiving or whatever. I need to go back and watch them. It's been a while, but I think it's on that video where he even directly just says like, yeah, Craig's just not even completely like understanding what's going on. I think it's that video.
But cosmology is not going to be resolved in the using, again, intuitive ideas about space and time. It's way out there, and in fact, our current cosmology has problems, and they're getting more serious over time. They're not the kinds of things that we see here.
Face the problem of a cosmic beginning, end quote. That problem was nicely captured by Anthony Kenny of Oxford University when he wrote, a proponent of the Big Bang theory, at least if he is an atheist, must believe that the universe came from nothing and by nothing.
That's not true.
But surely that doesn't make sense. For such a conclusion is, in the words of the philosopher of science, Bernhard Königscheider, in head-on collision with the most successful ontological commitment in the history of science, namely the metaphysical principle that out of nothing, nothing comes. So, why does the universe exist?
I just wanted to preface that Craig actually affirms that thing because he thinks that God took a whole bunch of nothing, right? This whole pile of nothing and formed the universe out of it. Not like used part of himself or some substance or material and formed it into the universe. He holds to, and he said this very specifically, Christian doctrine, that God created the universe ex nihilo. So it seems like some really strange metaphysical cherry picking that he does in these cases where why is it okay for there to be an efficient cause or the thing causing or affecting the thing, but there being no thing for him to affect, somehow getting an effect out of it.
Reasonable to imagine. It's not reasonable to imagine that something comes from nothing, as long as you have something extremely complex that's responsible for that thing coming into being.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I just think even by his own lights, it's just strange that he would make statements like that, but then it seems like by parity of reasoning, okay, then I don't know why that doesn't apply to the creatio ex nihilo, but
instead of just nothing. Where did it come from? There must have been a cause which brought the universe into being. We can summarize the argument thus far as follows. Premise one, whatever begins to exist has a cause. 2, the universe began to exist. 3, therefore, the universe has a cause.
Pause it.
Given the truth of the two premises,
Okay, so let's address the premises.
Well, I reject the first premise, but as a
David?
mereological nihilist, but I don't think things begin to exist. But David, what say you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's no consensus on the notion of beginning of time, and we also criticize the idea of things beginning to exist within the universe, apart from the beginning of the universe question. That's already somewhat that's already problematic. So again, we're mixing cause and effect with the idea that time has a beginning. Completely different things.
Or that the cause, somehow causality is fundamental. Doesn't, I mean, that
Right,
seems like that's
right.
kind of baked in there, which
We mentioned a little bit
We have
time.
good
We haven't discussed cause and effect and how
Yeah.
it's not fundamental, right?
yeah, that, which you guys had a conversation with some theists, and as an outsider on that, even though, you know, I'm biased towards the people I like, but it was really frustrating to hear you guys express that view. And
But
then
again, these are
them,
counterintuitive ideas. It's hard to describe them. It's hard.
well,
to
and what's annoying now is that you made a distinction between, you made a very specific distinction. So if you want to say that whatever begins to exist has an explanation, you were like, I might be able to be okay with that. And they wanted to like say that they had gotten you like in conflating that, but now, because, and I'm not saying because I sent them several things to look at, but now that they're more like adept to the philosophical landscape, they realize that that was a mistake, because there is like a cause is just a type of explanation, right? It doesn't exhaust types of explanations that you can give. They're not numerically identical to say an explanation is a cause. And I just wanted to point that out, that everything that was stated there, I think is a valid move and actually a more reasonable move. But it was really
it was
frustrating
mentioned that
people conflate, say that you were basically agreeing or conceding to the argument when you weren't.
it was mentioned on the show by one of the panelists that, I don't know if this is really true, but it seemed reasonable that in the past, cause and explanation were conflated, which is reasonable. But of course, in light of modern physics, you want to make that distinction.
Yeah. I ended up sending them a conversation on a Kalam debate with a professor, Graham Oppie, who's a philosopher, and he used their most cherished thing, which is the principle of sufficient reason, just that everything, must have a sufficient, so everything's going to have an explanation.
Why don't you have him on the show?
Oppie, that'd be great. I would love to. But I sent them a clip of him basically making that distinction. I never got a response back. I sent it like 20 times. I was like, what do you guys think of this? Like, do you disagree with this guy? Because you guys seem to cite him whenever he fits things that you say. But so let's go ahead and move on. And
the conclusion necessarily follows. Now, what sort of cause is this? Well, from the very nature.
Just real quick so we can sum up. There's reason to reject the first premise, especially a mereological nihilist, which was a side point because you don't think things begin to exist. Me and David made kind of somewhat tangent points about that premise, as well as cause and fundamental, as well as the second premise, claiming that the universe began to exist. So there's a lot of reasons to deny that, as well as, even if accepting it, it seems like to me, you would just get the conclusion that the universe has a material cause. Because things, if you accept things beginning to exist have a cause, that seems to entail like a material cause, because that's our experience. So it won't lead you to this Christian theism of like God creating out of nothing, because that's not the causal principle. The causal principle is very clearly a material cause and an efficient cause, not just an efficient cause being God and no material at all. Right? That seems to just completely cherry pick one of those things that Craig is pulling out of his hat of intuitions, which is why it doesn't get through that concrete wall of ignorance in his head. But anyway, we'll move on.
By the way, we should also point out that you guys had Daniela Perez on from Argentina, who discussed,
Yeah.
who brought forth some criticisms from the theory of relativity on this topic.
Yeah, people should go back and watch that episode.
Yeah, please go back. Yeah, definitely go back and watch that. I need to go back and watch that for myself.
Guys, I only have a few more minutes before.
Yeah, I actually got to go soon myself. Do you want to try to do? The main thing I wanted to get through was just to the syllogism, just to see your response of it. But do you want to just play out a part of this, or do you want to just kind of conclude?
No, I think we addressed this enough.
Sure. So maybe we can come back to that on a part 2, and then also do more in the quantum. Because Cece, you might know better than I do. I think those were our higher viewed episodes with David, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that's what I'm gonna look back, if that's what the people want, I'm gonna give people what they want. But
we should also mention you guys did a show on dark. You had a dark matter person on. Critical dark matter. That's something we never talked about in any detail. The Hubble tension, dark energy, these kinds of things.
Primordial black holes I've wanted to talk to you about. I'm not like my buddy's like all like he was trying to explain to me how it I don't know what he was saying. It falsifies the Big Bang. I don't know what his claim was. I have to ask him about it again because I think I got him to back off of his claim a little bit there. But he, I wanted to. I'll get maybe what.
Primordial black holes are the reason we can communicate on these computers.
Yeah, and so I was gonna say I don't think like what you're claiming is gonna be in high tension with this guy David that I talked to. So I'll get the claim, but any brief things that you might want to say, since black hole cosmology is your thing at all, maybe you just want to mention before we go. Educate me or something. I don't know.
Primordial black holes.
Yeah, I don't know. 5-second synopsis.
So black holes have this property that they seem to radiate. So they give off heat, and if the black hole is very small, this can happen within a relatively short time. And we have done calculations suggesting that these things should have gone pop in recent times, and we should be able to detect them. And the people have been looking for these things, and the techniques that people use to detect these black holes are the techniques that we ultimately used to get the internet to work. High-speed Wi-Fi is based on those techniques.
That's crazy. That's awesome. Well, David, thank you again for coming on. We really appreciate it. And thank you
guys.
All the viewers. David comes on here willingly.
I think I came on the first time 2 years ago at this point. Is that right?
Has it been that long already?
That feels...
I
want to say a year. If it's a year and we did 100 episodes, that's great, but I think you're
probably 2 years. It's 2020.
Probably about 2 years. Got it. So I mean, I still feel okay with it. 50 episodes in a year, like it sounds like a lot, but we can definitely step that number up to 100 episodes every year at least. So that'll be our goal. But David gives up his time and does a lot. Sometimes stays, after and takes time away from his own daily life. So please give him appreciation and things like that in the comments. We really appreciate that. But yeah, David, thank you
for having me. I'll see you next time.
Of course, we you're our favorite science guest. If it I was gonna say our only one, but you've actually brought us a lot. You brought us Dave. You brought us Dave, and then the people that you just mentioned. I'm forgetting their names. The physicists as well. The one that you were on with, as well as the one that Cease did a show with. Yeah. And so we really appreciate David's a huge source for a lot of our guests. Suggested Professor Dave, and he got on. And so thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone who supports what we're doing. We'll definitely come out with more content more consistently. And I'm glad that I feel like what we're doing is making a difference. So
and it's fun. So that's always a good thing, if you're
Thank you guys.
Thank you. All right, and everybody, we are gonna bounce out. Thank you for the 100th episode. Sorry we didn't do like any partying or drinking or anything. It's we're kind of chill
Well, I don't drink, so
I got all my drinking done during Corbin's wedding, so I'm
Mm.
about good for the rest of my life. There, put it that way.
That's
No, I'm already feeling mentally just exhausted, so I might as well be, just from how mentally drained I am. Thank you for indulging us and my crappy background, maybe crappy audio and fan spinning. We really appreciate everybody that sticks with us through all the little errors or scheduling issues, and we really greatly appreciate that. So thank you. Steve, anything you want to say?
no. I think that we had talked about potentially doing an episode discussing the rule following arguments.
Yeah.
That will be coming up, and you had talked about
Kind of two distinctions there. Like there's the epistemic kind of one, which is like the general one, and then like ways that I guess are potential issues for like issues in philosophy of mind. But I think it's good to distinguish those, because one's like an ontological issue and the other's an epistemic issue.
right. Yeah, no, we'll definitely be coming up with more new things. I think it was good to sort of do a summary of everything that we've kind of gone over, and it was good to get his thoughts on fine tuning and everything.
Yeah, it gets us warmed back up too. So gets us back in the hot seat. So if you guys are wanting any more content, please leave a comment down and tell us what you want us to do. That would greatly help us, figure that out. Sometimes we're just like, hey, we want to do a show on, and dig in the back of our heads to find out what topic we're either into at the moment or that we'd like to talk about. And it really goes a long way if somebody suggests something that me and him just, for whatever reason, have a mental block we don't think of, because it could be something really simple where we go, yep, doing an episode. So please leave, if you stayed this far with us, leave a comment with what episode you want, and give a like, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. If not, we will still be here for you to watch. So peace out. We love you. Be safe.
See you next time.